Hey there, Outfox fans. This is Leela, your community manager, and with me today I have...
My name is Ben McCloskey. I am a engineer on the Outfox team. I've worked on a bunch of different pieces of it. Right now I mostly work on our API backend. So when something goes right when you're trying to create an account and get all that stuff set up, that's what I'm responsible for.
But what about when it goes wrong? That's not
that's
you.
everybody
That's
else.
someone else.
Yes, yeah,
Always. Exactly. I love it. That's
Yes.
the way it works, right?
As software engineers fully know, our code is always perfect every single time, and none of us ever make mistakes. Yeah.
Of course.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Same here.
Right,
know?
exactly. Yeah.
Same
Community
here.
managers are never
No
wrong.
typos. I've never made one. Nothing like that.
I've never seen one.
So for those of us like myself that aren't really in the engineering technical space, what does that really mean for your day to day? What is it that you're really working on every day with Outfox?
So most days I'm writing Python code for our API backend. So we have a bunch of APIs. They're mostly used internally. So it's like what our website talks to in order to sort of, I refer to it a lot of times as plumbing, which is, it's getting...
So you're a plumber. Is that what you're telling me?
Like a software plumber is probably a fairly accurate thing in some cases. But yeah, so, managing notifications and things like that where, when changes happen on one service that we use so we use a couple different backend services to manage subscriptions and authentication and the user base and so forth, like the forums and all that kind of stuff. So it's keeping all that stuff in sync, and so we have a system that does all that. And that's
making sure everything plays nicely with each other.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a task.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So in addition to being a plumber, I'm also sort of like a kindergarten teacher
for software
for our services. Exactly. Yeah.
I love the analogies; those are really good. So one of the big things that a lot of folks ask us, and that they really want to learn more about, is how Outfox actually works. Because for some of us, it seems like magic, but it's not.
So I like to think of that as, we're putting a really good user experience on it. It should seem like magic, right?
Yeah.
But I definitely get some of the skepticism as well. When we first started talking about this, I certainly, like pretty much everybody else on the engineering team, kind of had one eyebrow raised of but if we're adding in extra hops, how is that faster? Which is generally most people's understanding, and I get it. Because you think well, if I'm taking basically a longer route, how can I get there faster? And the easy analogy is Waze. Or Google Maps or whatever sort of GPS service. Sometimes when it's really trafficy, it's faster to go a longer route because it's your average speed is higher, basically, right? So you take back roads, get around a traffic jam, save yourself a couple minutes. Even though as the crow flies, it's actually a little bit longer. So that's the really easy analogy. And then where Outfox sort of takes that to the next level is it's like that, except we have our own private backroad system. So the way Outfox works, right, is we have a bunch of different POPs, is what we call them, points of presence, which are servers that we host on data centers all over the world. Some of them are ours, some of them are third-party data centers. And we constantly, when you're running your game, what we're doing is we're pinging around to all those different servers and saying, hey, if we go through you, is it actually a little bit faster to get to this destination? Because what your ISP is doing is they're really focusing on reliability. Their number one goal is to make sure that your packet gets where it's going and doesn't mess something up on the way, because they are managing millions, billions of packets. Well, packets probably trillions over a pretty short time scale, like a day or so. Lots and lots of connections. I don't know if anybody saw this recently, but there was a big outage sometime this week. And people were like, oh, was it the Russians or whatever? No, it was Level 3, which is a backbone provider, messed up some protocol switch and some configuration thing that had a bad deploy, and all hell broke loose because routes were going places they weren't supposed to. These guys carefully craft their routes to make sure that things don't get overloaded, don't get too trafficy, and they're constantly tinkering with that as well. But what they're not doing is really focusing on squeezing every extra ounce of speed for a given connection, right? So if you're trying to play League of Legends or PUBG or whatever, they're fine if you're hitting 200 millisecond ping, right? Whatever.
Right.
But
yeah.
A lot of gamers, take these things really seriously, and they're like, no, I want 150. I want 100. I want to get faster, and I get that too. And so that's what Outfox helps you do. Is it sort of says, okay, we're gonna make this connection for a long period of time, right? Because you're playing a game, you're there for at least 20 minutes, half hour, it could be even more. And once we've sort of had that mapped out by the ISP of, okay, they're going to get you from point A to point B, Outfox is going to go, okay, what if I go through points, C through Z, are any of these a little bit faster? What we find is usually we are able to get actually an improvement. So I think our numbers are somewhere in like the 75% range of connections are improved. I don't know the exact speed numbers on like how much benefit people get. And that also depends on sort of how fast their connection is anyway. So we're only really promising a marginal improvement, but that's that's what people are looking for. Is every extra edge counts. So yeah, that's really the big thing. Is we are designed for speed. Your router, your ISP, is generally designed for reliability. And what we end up doing is almost having like sort of like a shadow ISP kind of vibe going, where we have all these routes mapped out. We, our network engineers are constantly tinkering, like I was saying before, the big level 3 providers and so forth. Our guys are working constantly to tinker, make sure that this route, okay, this one's used really heavily, we'll add a little extra resource to the server. This one isn't really used, let's try moving it around, see if we can get some usage out of it. And we are constantly focused on how do you get the fastest speed. Okay, where are a lot of our connections coming from? We've had promotions where occasionally, like a lot of people in South America have signed up, or I think we had one in South Korea as well. And so, very quickly we're like, oh, let's add some hops in that area so that we know where we add extra routes, get people where they're going faster. It's the ways in the internet, I think, is the easiest analogy. It's getting around a traffic jam, but also you kind of have that it's also like a little private shuttle service going on in there as well. So.
Yeah, and I think we've already kind of touched on a little bit of my next question, which is, what does Outfox do that your ISP doesn't? Which really is, give you more options and care about speed. Right.
So our company has been a couple different things over time. Its original heritage was actually as a dial-up ISP. So there are people here who have been working for 20 years to 30 years to set up these things and make sure they're running reliably and smoothly and quickly. And on top of that, we've also built data centers, data center services, and we do a lot of hosting. We run a VPN company, which is almost, this sort of started by brainstorming what can we do with our VPN technology, because our VPN technology is kind of running its own ISP, right? We have all these servers and all these locations, and we are providing lots of routes and connections and ways to get places that are a little off the beaten path, and that has some benefits. And that's actually where we originally sort of got this idea, was we're looking at a lot of people ended up using our VPN just to get to Netflix faster. They're in the United States, they're connecting within the United States, they're not trying to get around anything, they're not trying to cheat the system, they're just like, Verizon at 6 p.m. on a Thursday is just jammed trying to get to Netflix. I don't know if you remember the whole summer Netflix thing, was a couple of years ago. That's where this all started, was we found, even though in a VPN is adding a lot of overhead, right? Because it's encrypting and then decrypting the traffic as it goes, and that has its own benefits. But when you're playing a game, you don't really care. You can sometimes, a lot of professional gaming teams will use it for DDoS protection and stuff like that. When they're high profile enough that people are going to target them just to be.
And we've worked with esports teams for that exact reason before, because they've had those problems.
Exactly.
So, sure.
Right, and so what Outfox does, it doesn't do any of the encryption, doesn't do any of that overhead, because we're really focused on just raw speed. How do we get your packets to the server and back to the game server and back as fast as possible, and still reliably. Obviously, if we're dropping packets along the way, that doesn't do anybody any good. So.
Right. So now that we've talked a little bit about how it works, what are some situations where Outfox is really helpful for people? Do you have any sort of use cases for folks?
Yeah, so the main one really is sort of that rush hour thing I'm talking about. And same thing happens on internet traffic as it does in a highway in Austin. or any major city. I was almost late for this interview because I was stuck in traffic getting back from lunch. And at peak times, a lot of people are trying to get to the same places, and those jam up. And like I said before, ISPs are constantly working with each other. They're working with CDNs, content domain networks, content providers. There's a lot of under the hood stuff going on. When you connect to Verizon isn't serving your connection to everywhere. They're serving your connection to these backbone providers who are then taking you to other places, and it's this whole network, literally, network of companies and organizations, but also building out that network that we call the internet, right? It's really just a bunch of computers hooked up to each other.
It's not a series of tubes?
No, but that is my Wi-Fi name.
Going off of that, I have that exact experience at home whenever I try to play Overwatch on Friday nights. Oh my goodness, my ping will go up to like over 100, 150 when normally it's like 50. So
Yep, absolutely.
I will try to always remember to fire up Outfox first, because it's just those times are super busy for everyone and it negatively impacts my game. But
yeah.
Outfox is there to help, which is really nice.
Yeah, and that is definitely the best use case. We also see a lot of people trying to use it when they just don't have a great internet connection, in the remote locations. And that can be somewhat of a mixed bag, because it depends on how our network is set up and to try to accommodate. So we're trying to work with people where some people come in and say, hey, it's working great, and some other people come in and be like, I can't connect to my game. You're supposed to help speed it up, and I still can't connect through you guys. And we're like, okay, so we try and work with people, try and figure out where they're trying to connect from. And sometimes it's like, hey, I'm in a hut in the middle of the woods in, eastern Ukraine, and I can't get anywhere. It's like, well, sorry, we're offering like a 10% maybe speed bump is what we're, marginal improvement. We can't actually, create a fast connection if you are on like a satellite connection or something like that. So the best use case is really that high peak time, trying to get somewhere that everybody else is going, and we're gonna play ways for you and be like, okay, well, it turns out if you take this right over here, get on the private Outfox road, we'll actually get there a little bit faster.
I've also heard really good feedback from players that are trying to play on game servers outside of their region.
Yes,
which is never going to be
Yep.
ideal. You're never going to have a perfect speed like you would playing in a region that's close to home. But like, for example, I just heard a story recently from a user in Asia who plays on the North American League of Legends servers with his friends, and he's getting almost 300 ping without Outfox, but we're able to bring it down to like 200. So that's a big improvement. It's still not the perfect. He never want 200 ping normally, but that's a really good improvement basically.
When your alternative is 300, it's better.
Yeah, so it makes the game more playable. I think that's kind of that threshold of, is it playable or not, and I think that's really
right
one where it's making it playable, and that was really great to hear that we're able to help someone like that. So.
Exactly, because when you're traveling across regions, you get even more choke points than normal. Because if you've ever go look up the fiber mapping, it's actually really cool. You can actually see where the fiber links go from continent to continent and city to city and so forth. Yeah, but there's 5 that run across the oceans, and so there's a computer on one end and a computer on the other, and they're linked by this gigantic cable that's this big around, that's dug underneath the ocean, and so you're sharing that with everybody, but even though there's only a handful, sometimes one of them is going to get a lot more traffic than another, and a lot of times the gaming companies will set up their own servers, their own sort of content network, and they are assuming that if you're trying to come into the Western U.S. region, that you're coming from roughly the Western U.S. They're assuming you're not trying to come there from China or somewhere halfway across the globe. So they may not be optimizing for that, and that's sort of where we step in and say, hey, we're trying to optimize for everybody as much as we can. So.
Yeah, going off of that, I do have some stats here to share, some of our little bit of bragging rights, right, for the performance that we've had with Outfox. So as we mentioned earlier, we're at about a 74-75% overall improvement. So that's in North America across all games that we support. Almost 75% of our users seeing an improvement with Outfox, which is
awesome. Yeah.
really awesome.
That is especially awesome because that was down around 50 a couple weeks ago. I just got married and I left for 2 weeks, and
you came back and it's all different.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but even when we first started, I remember it was not this high of a number.
Yeah, exactly.
But the work has been put in constantly to improve and grow, and I know, and that is definitely something for us to be proud of.
Yeah, and shout outs to the guys and gals over in the networking team, because that's really what they're working on. Is like I was saying before, setting up those routes, optimizing, because it makes a lot of sense that we see those improvements continuously. especially now when we've recently launched, because we're seeing, oh, it turns out that nobody cares about connecting through Romania or whatever. I'm making this up. Sorry if anyone's offended by my.
We've actually had a request.
Okay, yeah.
You picked one that we've actually had a request.
It's probably why it's fresh in my memory.
But hey, there's always someone.
Right, exactly. But we're seeing, it turns out that there's a lot of people trying to connect from, Eastern Asia to the Western U.S. And like you were saying before, that one's a pretty common one. So I know that's one we've been working on, trying to figure out buying extra routes, extra leases, extra IPs, adding extra servers, extra resources. Just trying to always make it better.
And one of the games that we supported, during beta, which is kind of one of our biggest additions, was PUBG.
Yeah.
It's, everyone's favorite game right now. It seems like
I am terrible.
I am super bad.
So bad.
I'm good at the part where you look for things.
Yeah.
And you hide.
Yeah.
But that doesn't win the game.
No, it turns out. I'm also really bad at the running to catch up to the blue wall thing. Yeah, that's because I'm the same.
I can do that. Yeah. I can do that part. But as soon as someone shows up, I'm in trouble. But anyway.
But I feel like that sort of plays into the game. Like, I feel like you definitely, there's almost part of the appeal to it is that it has like a really high learning curve. Because
it really does.
Like the nature of the game is like, oh, you're all dropped on this island, like go. And so it sort of seems like it's a natural. Yeah, exactly. Like, a bunch of those people are going to be like, oh, crap, what have I gotten myself into?
I'm not cut out for the Hunger Games.
Exactly, yeah.
I don't want to be chosen,
Right, but there's 3 people from whatever that district who...
when they practice.
Right,
yeah,
exactly. They've been training their whole lives.
Like.
Yeah.
That's the guys on Twitch, Shroud.
That's Cody, Mr. Chicken Dinner.
Yeah. Anyway, so, PUBG has notorious network issues because it's an early access game and things like that, but it is super popular, so a lot of people are playing it. And luckily, using Outfox, since we're, I think, the only service at this time that actually works to provide this kind of improvement for PUBG, is 68 players see an improvement with PUBG using Outfox, which is really great. And if in North America only, this goes up to 78%.
Oh, wow.
So that's an amazing amount of players. We've had a lot of PUBG players come in through some influencers and things like that we've been working with. We have a lot of fans that use Outfox and play PUBG. We do here in the office as well.
Yeah.
So it's really awesome to see that sort of improvement. And our second most popular game we do tournaments for sometimes, which is League of Legends. And that one goes up to 86% of North American users seeing an improvement with Outfox.
And I'd like to point out, that's with Riot Games essentially doing their own Outfox product behind the scenes. Something we talked about when we were first investigating this, whether or not it was just worth spending the time and looking into it. Because again, to speak to the skepticism that a lot of people justifiably have, our entire engineering team, we saw some competitors who shall not be named crop up, and the product folks were like, "Hey, we can do this, right?" And we went, "No, that's snake oil. That's nonsense." And then the product people are like, no, like they're getting results. Like people are saying it helps, so like they must be doing something right. And we're like, oh, okay, let's take a look and dive in and see how this works. And one of the things that we first found was that Riot Games was spending some outlandish amount of money on essentially doing that, building out their whole own almost like mini ISP. Just tons of servers, really more of a content network, but ton of servers, like really mapping it out and really aggressively putting resources into improving those connections, and we can still improve on it.
Hey, what do you know? But there's a lot of League of Legends players, so there's lots of situations where, even with what they've done so far, you still are having high ping and things like that.
And that's one where that ping also really makes a difference, because it's so,
it really does.
So fast.
We've talked about, where it came from and where we are now. What about the future for Outfox? What do you think? Where do you see us going, and what can you share?
So the biggest thing is just really to keep improving the product. I know that's a really broad phrase, but we don't have any like super flashy features that I can talk about that are under development. And the biggest stuff is really, it's just making those sort of nuts and bolts improvements. So like recently, our big super sexy feature was we added multi-ingress, which allows us to, now we map out not only from different sites, but different service providers per site. Because a lot of our sites have connections to different, so it's like our data center has, hookups to Verizon, Comcast, Level 3, a whole bunch of other ISPs that I'm not thinking of. And so similarly, all other data centers have multiple connections in and out. And so what we've done now is we are mapping not just, from point A to point B, but it's from point A to point B on provider 1, provider 2, provider 3. And so some of those are going to be faster, some of those are going to be slower. That's always going to be changing and shifting, and so it's mapping that out. And just trying to squeeze every ounce of efficiency.
So to our users, it might not look different, but
yeah, they're not really going to see that.
That's where those numbers come from that we were talking about, is that getting up to 75% of users seeing improvement. Those are the types of things that make that happen.
Exactly.
So it's kind of the behind the scenes folks like yourself that we really appreciate.
Me too.
And then we don't get to see as often, so it's nice to have these little interviews and talks. And speaking of which, we'll have more of these hopefully on our YouTube channel and also on our blog, where we talk to some more of the people behind the scenes that make Outfox tick. So thanks for your time today, Ben.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.